The official incident report classifies what happened on the Marauder platform as a containment breach with no anomalous entity recovered. That is a lie. I know it's a lie because I found the previous watchman's teeth in the choke manifold. Not all of them. Just 3 molars, lined up in a row like he'd arranged them deliberately. Like a classified warning in a language I haven't been cleared to understand. I've been on this off-grid rig for 8 days. I am the only living person within 90 miles of open Gulf, and I am no longer certain that I am the only me. My name is Edward. I'm a subsea systems technician, 34 years old, and until last Tuesday I thought I had the easiest gig in offshore oil. The Marauder is a jack-up rig, cold-stacked 60 miles south of Grand Isle, Louisiana. For the non-industry folks listening, cold-stacked means mothballed. The well beneath us was plugged and abandoned 18 months ago after the reservoir came up dry. The drilling contract expired. The operator, Pelican Offshore, decided to preserve the asset rather than scrap it, which meant keeping a skeleton crew of exactly 1 person on board to run the diesel generators, monitor the cathodic protection, and make sure the BOP stack didn't decide to rust itself into a multi-million-dollar paperweight. That skeleton crew was me. 14 days on, 14 days off. 2 weeks of absolute isolation for pay that made my ex-wife's alimony look like pocket change. The helicopter dropped me on the helideck at 06 Rodan on a Monday, the pilot barely looking at me as he handed over my manifest. "Weather's turning Thursday," he said. "Supply boat'll be by Friday if you need anything." Then the Sikorsky lifted off, and the rotor wash beat against my hard hat, and the sound dopplered away into nothing, and I was alone. The Marauder in cold stack mode is a ghost ship with the lights still on. The living quarters are on the main deck, starboard side, 12 bunk rooms, a galley that smells permanently of industrial disinfectant, a gym with 1 working treadmill, and a rec room with a flat screen that only plays the same 47 movies on a loop. I picked the bunk closest to the galley because it had the least mildew in the HVAC vent. I unpacked my coveralls, my FRCs, my steel toes, and the paperback thriller I'd already read twice. I told myself I was going to catch up on sleep, eat frozen pizza, and run the prescribed checks twice a day like a good little preservation tech. The rig runs on a pair of Caterpillar C32 diesel generators, 1,200 horsepower each, enough to keep the bilge pumps, the nav lights, the cathodic protection rectifiers, and the communications suite humming. My first walkthrough was at 1400. I checked the fuel levels, the lube oil pressure, the coolant temp. I walked the wellhead deck, where the BOP stack sits like a steel wedding cake bolted to the casing head. The accumulator read 3,000 psi, green across the board. The blind shear rams were closed and locked. The kill line and choke line valves were tagged and sealed. Everything was exactly as it should have been on a dead well. I remember standing at the rail that first evening, watching the sun drop into the Gulf. The water was the color of burnt motor oil, flat as a mirror. There was no wind, no swell. I've worked offshore for 11 years, and I have never seen the Gulf that still. It looked less like an ocean and more like a surface. Something stretched tight over a mouth. I went inside, microwaved a burrito, and slept 10 hours. That was before the unexplained phenomena began. According to the maintenance logs, the first incident happened at 0647 on day 2, but I didn't consult the logs until later. What I actually found was the coffee mug waiting for me on the galley counter when I woke up. White ceramic. Pelican Offshore logo on one side, and on the other, in faded Sharpie, the initials MH, my initials. But I hadn't brought a mug. I don't drink coffee on watch. The galley coffee tastes like it was brewed through a sock. I stood there in my underwear, staring at those 2 letters, and I felt something cold move behind my sternum. Then I rationalized it. Of course. The previous watchman, probably another MH Mike something, Mark, Matt. There are a lot of us in this industry with those initials. I put the mug in the cabinet above the sink and forgot about it. Day 2 was otherwise routine. Morning generator check. Afternoon walkthrough of the subsea equipment room, where the hydraulic control unit for the BOP lives in a climate-controlled cage. I logged the accumulator pressure 2,980 psi, well within tolerance. I checked the cathodic protection readouts on the rectifiers, negative 0.85 volts on all hull zones. Good. The steel was protected. The rig wasn't corroding out from under me. That night, at 0347, I woke to the sound of hydraulics. It was unmistakable. The high-pitched whine of a hydraulic pump cycling, the kind of sound the BOP accumulator makes when it's charging the bottle bank. But the BOP shouldn't have been cycling. The BOP on a cold stacked rig is a static system. No pressure changes, no fluid movement. The rams are locked. The well is dead. I pulled on my coveralls and boots and grabbed my flashlight. The Marauder at night is a different creature. The corridors are lit by emergency fluorescents that buzz at exactly the frequency that makes your fillings hurt. The wind had picked up and the rig was groaning in a way I hadn't heard during the day, the legs flexing, the jacket structure singing in the dark. I walked the wellhead deck with my flashlight beam cutting through the salt mist. The accumulator gauge read 3,000 psi. The pump was silent. I checked the HCU cabinet, no leaks, no warm spots on the motor housing. Thermal expansion, I told myself. Or a sticky relay in the pressure switch causing a false start. I'd log it and mention it to the next mechanic. I went back to bed. I didn't sleep. 3 days later, I found hair in the shower drain. Not a few strands. A clump. Dark brown. The same color as mine. The same wavy texture. But I'd showered the night before, and I always clean the drain. It's a habit from shared quarters. You don't leave your mess for the next guy. I stood there with the clump in my hand, wet and heavy, and I told myself, previous watchman, Mike or Mark or Matt, shedding his last few days on the rig. The cleaning crew between rotations must have missed it. I flushed it down the toilet and ran the water for 30 seconds. I almost believed it. The corrupted audio came through on day 4. I was in the comms room, running the daily systems check. VHF on channel 16. The distress and hailing frequency, squelch, turned low. The satellite phone was showing a full signal, Inmarsat link solid, VSAT green. I was about to switch to the company frequency when the static broke. Marauder platform, radio check. The voice was mine, not similar, not a trick of distortion. My voice with my accent, my cadence, the slight hoarseness I get when I haven't talked to another person in days. I froze with my hand on the volume knob. The voice repeated, Marauder platform, this is, and then static swallowed the rest. I keyed the mic. This is Marauder platform. Identify yourself. Nothing. Just the hiss of open airwaves and the distant pulse of some weather system far to the south. I told myself it was skip. Atmospheric ducting. VHF can bounce off temperature inversions, carry voices for hundreds of miles under the right conditions. Some other rig worker with a similar timbre. Some fishing boat captain with a smoker's rasp like mine. The Gulf does strange things to radio. I'd heard stories. Everyone has. But I didn't switch the VHF off. I left it on all night, volume up, and I lay in my bunk listening to the static like it was a heartbeat. That was when I found the second logbook. Not the official one. The official log was where it should have been, in the control room. My entries neat and professional. Generator temps, accumulator pressure, weather observations. This other log was tucked behind the breaker panel in the subsea equipment room, a yellowed composition notebook with the Pelican Offshore logo on the cover. The first entry was dated 11 months ago. The handwriting was cramped, hurried, the pen pressing so hard it embossed the next 3 pages. Day 3, Bob cycled again at 0347. Same time. Check the stack. Blind rams show wear marks on the packers, like they've been closed and opened repeatedly, but they haven't. I haven't touched them. The well is dead. The well is supposed to be dead. I turned the page. Day 6, found my toothbrush in the subsea locker, wet, used. I keep it in the galley. I asked the company if anyone else has been on the rig. They said no. They said I'm the only one. The entries got worse. Day 8, the water in the shower smells like crude, sweet and sulfurous. But the well is dead. There's no crude. There's nothing down there. Day 10, I can hear him walking above me when I'm below deck. I can hear his boots. Same gait, same weight. I called out and the footsteps stopped. The last entry was day 12. No text, just a drawing. 3 circles in a row, each one smaller than the last, and beneath them, in shaky block letters, IT wears you like a suit. I checked the company records on the rig's computer. The previous preservation watch before me was a man named David Kowalski. He finished his 14-day rotation on schedule. The helicopter manifest confirmed it. David Kowalski checked in, checked out, flown to Forshawn, status normal. But the logbook in my hands was not David Kowalski's handwriting. It was mine. I spent day 6 trying to prove I was wrong. I compared the logbook handwriting to my own signature on the Pelican employment forms I'd filled out 6 months ago. I laid them side by side on the galley table. The slant was identical. The way I crossed my T's with a short horizontal slash. The way my G's looped open at the bottom. I told myself I was being paranoid. That David Kowalski and I just had similar handwriting. That the human eye sees patterns it wants to see. I was a technician, not a graphologist. I was tired. The isolation was getting to me. I called the company on the satellite phone, reached the operations desk in Houston. A woman named Cheryl answered, her voice crisp and landlocked. I asked about David Kowalski. She put me on hold for 4 minutes. When she came back, she said, "David completed his watch successfully. He's on rotation B now." "Why do you ask, Marcus?" I didn't know how to answer. Because I found his teeth? Because I found a book written in my own hand dated before I was hired. I said, "Just checking procedures." "You're doing fine," she said. "Supply boat's coming Friday, weather hold lifted. You can get fresh produce, maybe a magazine." That was the false safety. The supply boat. Real help. A vessel with people on it. People who could look at the logbook, who could tell me I was losing my mind, who could ferry me back to shore if I needed to quit. I clung to that Friday. 2 days away, I marked it on the calendar in the galley in thick red marker. Day 7, I went down to the wellhead deck at noon. I needed to do something with my hands. I decided to pull the maintenance tags on the bop stack and inspect the rams manually. It's not a one-person job, technically, but I wasn't operating them, just looking. I climbed the scaffold to the annular preventer housing and shone my flashlight down through the inspection port. The packer element. The rubber seal that closes around the pipe was scored. Deep grooves in the elastomer, running circumferentially, as if pipe had been rotated through it hundreds of times. But the Marauder's well had been P&A'd, plugged and abandoned. The production tubing had been pulled. There was no pipe in the hole. There shouldn't have been any pipe in the hole for 18 months. I climbed down. My hands were shaking. I told myself, previous operations, wear from before the stack. But the grooves looked fresh. The rubber was still black, not oxidized. And there was something else, a smell. Not the sharp chemical scent of hydraulic fluid. Something older. Something that smelled like the inside of a body cavity exposed to salt and pressure. I went inside. I locked my bunk room door. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall until the sun went down. At 2,230, the VHF crackled again. Marauder platform. Supply boat en route. ETA 06000 Friday. Confirm receipt. The voice was the captain's, or what I thought was the captain's, gruff, Gulf Coast accent. The words running together the way they do when you've been on the water for 30 years. I keyed the mic. Confirmed. Thank you, Captain. No problem, Marcus. See you in the morning. I felt relief so profound it made my eyes water. I went to sleep with the VHF still on, and for the first time since the coffee mug, I didn't dream. Friday morning, I was on the wellhead deck at 0530, watching the horizon. The Gulf was flat again. That same impossible glassiness. No whitecaps, no chop. The sky was the color of a bruise, low clouds pressing down like a lid. I scanned with binoculars. Nothing. No mast lights. No smoke trail. At 0707, I called on channel 16. No response. At 090 I called Pelican Operations. Cheryl answered. I asked about the supply boat. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Marcus, the supply boat was delayed by weather. It hasn't left Port Fourchon yet. It won't be there until Monday at the earliest." I spoke to the captain, I said. Thursday night. On channel 16. "That wasn't our captain, Marcus. Our captain's name is De Silva. He's been in the hospital since Tuesday. Gallbladder." I set the satellite phone down very carefully. I walked to the galley. I opened the cabinet above the sink. The coffee mug was there. MH. But now, beneath the initials, in the same faded Sharpie, was a date. 11/14. The date David Kowalski's rotation ended. The date he supposedly flew home healthy. I don't drink coffee. I never have. Day 8. I stopped sleeping. I couldn't risk it. Every time I closed my eyes, I woke with things moved. My flashlight was in the subsea locker. My hard hat was on the wellhead deck, sitting on the bop accumulator like someone had been wearing it. I found my own boot prints in the mudroom, leading out onto the main deck at 0400, but I had been in my bunk, awake, staring at the ceiling. The boots were wet with something that wasn't seawater. It was thicker. It smelled like the Packer element. I decided to pull the security footage. The Marauder has 6 CCTV cameras, legacy analog system, recording to a DVR in the comms room. They're motion activated to save hard drive space. I sat in the comms chair and scrolled through the files. Most were empty. Me walking to the generator shed, me in the galley, me on the wellhead deck. Then I found a file timestamped 0347, day 7. The camera was camera 4, covering the corridor outside the subsea equipment room. The footage was black and white, grainy, the IR LEDs casting everything in a sodium vapor glow. A figure walked into frame from the starboard side. He was wearing Pelican Offshore coveralls, FRC jacket, steel-toe boots. He moved with my gait, my slight limp on the left leg from a torn ACL 5 years ago. He stopped at the equipment room door and turned toward the camera. It was my face. Not similar. Not a brother or a cousin. My face with my 3-day stubble, my broken nose from high school football, my hairline starting to recede at the temples. He looked at the camera with an expression I didn't recognize. Not fear, not anger, curiosity. The way you look at an animal in a cage when you're trying to decide if it's intelligent enough to know it's trapped. Then he smiled, and he walked into the equipment room. I checked the timestamps. The figure appeared on camera 3, walking the wellhead deck, at 0345. On camera 6 in my bunk room, standing over my sleeping body, at 0341. I was asleep in that footage. I could see myself breathing under the blanket, and he stood there for 6 minutes, watching me breathe before he walked out and started his rounds. I ran to the equipment room. I threw open the door. The HCU cabinet was open, the control panel exposed. The manual override for the blind shear rams had been moved from closed to open and back to closed. The cycle counter on the panel had incremented by 1, and on the floor in a neat row were 3 teeth, molars, roots intact, dried blood on the enamel. I didn't vomit. I wish I had. Instead, I felt something break in my head, a clean snap like a shear pin giving way. I picked up the teeth. I held them in my palm, and I understood in a way that bypassed logic and went straight to the lizard part of the brain that they were mine. They were from my mouth. I could feel the gaps with my tongue, upper left, second and third molars, and lower right, first molar. I hadn't noticed them missing. I hadn't felt them go. But my tongue found the empty sockets now, the gum tissue smooth and healed, as if the teeth had been extracted weeks ago. I stumbled to the mirror in the head. I opened my mouth. The gaps were there, dark and wet and healed over. I touched them with my finger, and I felt nothing. No pain, no nerve response, just pressure against meat that had already accepted the loss. The wellhead was breathing. I could hear it now without trying. A slow, wet inhalation and exhalation, coming up through the casing, through the bop stack, through the steel deck plates. The Marauder wasn't sitting on a dead well. The Marauder was sitting on something that had been waiting for a long time, something that lived under pressure and in darkness, and it had been learning me, piece by piece, cell by cell. It had been taking samples, hair, skin, teeth, and it had been building a manifestation that wore my shape. I grabbed the satellite phone. I called Pelican. I called the Coast Guard. I called every number in the contact binder. No one answered. The phone showed full signal, Inmarsat link solid, but every line rang and rang and rang, or connected to dead air that sounded exactly like the wellhead breathing. Day 9, I armed myself. There was no weapons locker on the Marauder, but a rig is full of things that can hurt. I took a pipe wrench from the mechanic's shop, a fire axe from the emergency station, and a flare gun from the lifeboat canister. I stuffed my pockets with flares and magnesium burns. I put on my coveralls, my hard hat, my steel toes. I was going down to the moon pool. The moon pool on a jack-up is the open shaft through the center of the hull, the hole where the drill string descends to the wellhead below the rig. In cold stack mode, it's covered by a steel grating, locked down, sealed, but the grating was unbolted when I got there. The padlock was on the deck, sheared clean through, the metal still shiny. I looked down through the moon pool. The water was black, not dark, black. No light penetrated it. The casing head was visible 30 feet down, a steel collar disappearing into the water, and around it the water was moving, not with current, with intention. It was breathing, pulling back and surging forward, back and surging forward in a rhythm that matched the rise and fall of my own chest. I heard boots on the grating behind me. I turned. He was there. Me. Or the mimic wearing me. He was naked except for a pair of my coveralls, unzipped to the waist, and his skin was wrong. It was too smooth. No pores. No hair. The stubble on his jaw was painted on, a cosmetic detail like the hair on a mannequin. His eyes were my color, hazel, green in certain light. But the pupils were wrong. They were vertical, slitted, adapted for pressure and absolute dark. "You're not real," I said. He tilted his head. My gesture. My habit when I'm trying to understand a problem. "I'm more real than you are," he said. My voice, perfect pitch, perfect resonance. "You're the template. I'm the improvement." I raised the pipe wrench. He didn't flinch. He stepped closer, and I could smell him. That smell from the Packer element. From the moon pool. Salt and pressure and organic decay. "You felt it," he said. "The gaps, the missing pieces. We take what we need. We wear what works. The one before you, David, he lasted 12 days before he was ready. You're stronger. You've lasted 9. And you're still fighting. That's good. That means the flesh is healthy." "Where is he?" I said. "David. Where's David?" The thing smiled with my mouth. "He's down there. They're all down there. The well isn't dry, it's full, it's been full for a long time. We just needed the right pressure, the right temperature, the right skin." It moved fast. Faster than I could react. It closed the distance between us in a step that wasn't quite a step, more like a flow, and its hand was on my throat. The fingers were cold. Not human cold, deep water cold, the kind of cold that flash freezes tissue. I swung the wrench and connected with its temple. The sound was wrong, not the crack of bone, the thud of meat, of packed, compressed organic matter shaped into a skull. It staggered. I struck again. The temple caved. No blood. Just a thick, clear fluid that smelled like the inside of a jellyfish, and beneath the fluid, something gray and fibrous and wrong. It went down on the grating. Its legs kicked. The vertical pupils fixed on me, and it said in my voice, "You can't kill it. You can only make room." I didn't wait. I ran. I locked myself in the comms room. I wedged a chair under the handle. I sat in the dark with the flare gun in my lap, and I listened to it drag itself across the deck outside. The footsteps were uneven now, one leg dragging, but they didn't stop. They circled the comms room for an hour, 2 hours. Then they stopped. Then I heard the moon pool grating clang back into place. Bolts being turned, the lock being set. It's quiet now. Day 10. The satellite phone rang at dawn. Cheryl from Pelican. She sounded concerned. "Marcus, we've been trying to reach you. The supply boat is en route. ETA 4 hours. Are you okay?" I looked at my hands. The skin on my palms was peeling, not from work, from something else, from pressure. I could feel the gaps in my gums with my tongue. More of them now, 4 missing, 5. "I'm fine," I said. "I'll be ready." I looked in the mirror before I packed my bag. My eyes are hazel, green in certain light. I stared at them for a long time, waiting for the pupils to shift. They stayed round, human. But when I turned away, I caught the reflection's gaze in the corner of the glass, and I could have sworn it held the look a moment longer than I did. The helicopter is coming. I can hear it now, the thump of the rotors on the horizon. I have my duffel bag. I have my logbook. I have the 3 teeth in a Ziploc in my pocket, and I don't know if they're evidence or if they're a gift I'm supposed to deliver. The supply boat captain's name is De Silva. He's been in the hospital since Tuesday. Gallbladder. I know this. I know it because Cheryl told me. But when I called the boat on Channel 16 an hour ago, a disembodied voice answered. Gruff, Gulf Coast accent. He said, "See you soon, Marcus. We're all wearing our best suits. The rotors are getting louder. The water below the helideck is flat, black, breathing." I keep touching my face, feeling for seams.